Despite what you might imagine, the late Queen Elizabeth II was never driven by extravagance. Behind the glittering banquets, the diamond tiaras, and the golden state dinners, stood a woman with surprisingly simple tastes, a monarch who preferred cornflakes over caviar. Have you ever wondered what truly delighted the Queen's palate? What dishes she returned to after decades of royal duties, world tours, and state banquets? To understand her table is to understand the quiet rhythms of her life, the blend of ritual, discipline, and small pleasures that defined her reign. Today, we step beyond the palace gates, into the kitchens of Windsor, Balmoral, and Buckingham Palace, to discover the foods that shaped the Queen's days, from breakfast trays to evening indulgences. This is the story of tradition, taste, and the humble meals behind one of the grandest lives ever lived. Number 1. Breakfast at Buckingham. Imagine a quiet morning at Buckingham Palace. The city outside is already humming. Car horns, footsteps, a faint drizzle on the Mall. Yet inside, everything moves in soft precision. A silver tray arrives carried by a footman. On it, a pot of Earl Grey tea, no sugar, a few biscuits, and a small bowl of Kellogg's cornflakes, kept in a plastic container. The same brand the Queen had enjoyed since her girlhood. Sometimes, she would take scrambled eggs, gently seasoned, never runny, made from brown eggs produced by her own hens at Windsor. On Sundays, toast with marmalade, thinly spread, a small luxury unchanged across decades. The breakfast table wasn't about indulgence, but order. The Queen found comfort in routine, in knowing that each morning began the same way, calm, measured, and British to the core. It wasn't much, but it was home on a plate. Number 2. The midday meal. Every afternoon, before another round of audiences and paperwork, the Queen paused for a light lunch. There was no excess, no multi-course spread, just balance and simplicity. Grilled fish or chicken, perhaps a salad. Rarely potatoes, never garlic. The royal kitchen had long banned it, too pungent, too indelicate for public duty. Her chef of many years, Darren McGrady, often spoke of how predictable her meals were. Once she liked something, she wanted it again, exactly as before. Consistency was her quiet luxury. At Balmoral, salmon freshly caught from the River Dee would be grilled and served simply, with a wedge of lemon and a touch of butter, nothing more. It wasn't about culinary adventure, it was about nourishment that allowed her to continue working. Another day, another document, another audience. The Queen's lunch was never a feast, it was a pause between duties. Number 3. The royal afternoon tea. Every day at precisely 4 o'clock, the Queen observed one of Britain's most sacred rituals. Afternoon tea. Whether at Buckingham Palace or Balmoral Castle, this was her moment of stillness. The table would be laid with delicate china, finger sandwiches cut precisely to size, and the cakes she adored, especially chocolate biscuit cake, a firm favorite since childhood. So much so, she often requested it for travel, even to Windsor or Sandringham. Her sandwiches rarely changed: cucumber with thin butter, smoked salmon, egg and mayonnaise, or ham and mustard. Scones with clotted cream and jam followed, though the Queen preferred jam first, the Cornish way. Each sip of tea was deliberate. It wasn't merely a meal, it was ceremony, civility, and comfort woven together. For the Queen, afternoon tea wasn't indulgence. It was a reminder of the order and grace that held the monarchy together. Number 4. Dinner at the palace. On the evenings without grand banquets, the Queen's dinners were surprisingly modest. She enjoyed a well-done steak, always cooked through, accompanied by vegetables from her own gardens. At Balmoral, venison was often on the menu, hunted from the surrounding estate, a reflection of her lifelong love of the countryside. Her Majesty avoided heavy sauces and extravagant presentation. Simplicity was her measure of quality. A meal to her didn't need to impress. It needed to sustain. Yet even in its simplicity, every dish carried precision. Silver cutlery gleamed. The table was set just so. Service was silent, discreet, and exact. Once finished, She'd sometimes take a small bowl of strawberries or peaches, grown in the royal greenhouses at Windsor, and a glass of her favorite drink, a gin and Dubonnet. Even dinner, like everything in her life, was a quiet act of discipline wrapped in ritual. Number 5. The Sunday roast. Every Sunday, no matter where she was, the Queen upheld an old British tradition, the Sunday roast. It might be lamb, beef, or venison, roasted to perfection, served with gravy, roast potatoes, and Yorkshire pudding. At Balmoral, the ingredients often came straight from the estate: game from the hills, vegetables from the gardens. There was something grounding about eating what had been raised on her own land. This wasn't a performance, nor a gesture to the cameras. It was a family tradition. On those afternoons, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, she could almost set aside the weight of the crown. Conversations would drift to dogs, horses, and weather, the ordinary talk of an extraordinary family. It reminded her of her father, King George VI, who cherished those same quiet Sundays. In those moments, she wasn't the monarch. She was simply Lilibet, returning to the comforts of home. Number 6. The sweet tooth of a monarch. The Queen's taste in sweets was as steady as everything else in her life. She loved chocolate, particularly dark chocolate. Milk chocolate was too sweet, she'd once remarked. At royal receptions, the kitchens might produce elaborate desserts for guests. But for Her Majesty, the choice rarely changed. Chocolate perfection pie, chocolate mousse, or her beloved chocolate biscuit cake. It was said she'd enjoy a small slice every day, and if she ever traveled, the remaining cake would be sent ahead to her next residence. At Christmas, she favored rich fruit cake, the same one served each year, soaked in brandy, covered in marzipan. Even the smallest indulgence was steeped in tradition and routine, not impulse. The Queen's love of chocolate wasn't about sweetness. It was about steadiness, a flavor that reminded her of home, childhood, and continuity. For a life ruled by duty, chocolate was her quiet rebellion. Number 7. The picnic at Balmoral. Imagine a warm Scottish afternoon at Balmoral. The air smells of pine and peat, and somewhere in the distance, a river rushes over stone. Here the Queen was happiest, away from ceremony, surrounded by family and dogs and the open hills of Aberdeenshire. The royal picnic was as unpretentious as it was beloved. Barbecues were often led by Prince Philip himself, who manned the grill while the Queen prepared salad or poured drinks. On the menu, sausages, lamb chops, salmon, and her favorite, a simple hamburger, served without a bun, knife and fork only. The setting was as ordinary as it gets: folding tables, tartan rugs, paper plates. Yet it was here she laughed the loudest. Away from protocol, she could just be herself. It wasn't the food that mattered. It was the feeling of being free, if only for a little while. Number 8. The Queen's drinks. The Queen was never known to overindulge, but she enjoyed her drinks in a way that mirrored her meals: precise, consistent, and perfectly measured. Before lunch, she often took a gin and Dubonnet, 2 parts Dubonnet to 1 part gin, with a slice of lemon and ice. It became her signature cocktail, familiar to those who served her for decades. With dinner, a glass of her favorite sweet German wine, often Gewürztraminer or Riesling, and occasionally champagne to mark an evening occasion. She disliked strong or unpredictable flavors. Everything was balanced, restrained, deliberate. It's said she preferred her drinks at specific times, and never outside routine. Never before noon, never after supper. Even in this small ritual, there was dignity, because for the Queen, pleasure was not in abundance, but in balance, a quiet toast to constancy, more than celebration. Number 9. The ritual of menu approval. Every day, a red leather-bound book would land on the Queen's desk, the daily menu, handwritten by the royal chefs. She would read each page carefully, marking her approval with a neat tick, or occasionally writing "no" beside a dish she didn't fancy. If she disliked something, it simply vanished from future plans. There was no improvisation. Every course, every flavor was part of a system that had worked for generations. If she was traveling, the royal kitchen packed food from home. sometimes even her favorite chocolate biscuits, to ensure nothing was left to chance. This small daily act reflected the core of her life: order, discipline, and quiet control amid the noise of the world. Even in her meals, there was governance, not indulgence. It was never about grandeur, but about maintaining calm in a life where nothing else could be ordinary. Number 10. The humble treats. Every so often, the Queen indulged in what the rest of us might call simple comforts. A tin of chocolate digestives on her tea table, marmalade sandwiches, which her former staff confirmed were a quiet favourite long before Paddington ever offered one. At Balmoral, she loved jam pennies, tiny sandwiches of jam cut into circles, a childhood treat that remained with her through adulthood. When guests joined her for tea, she often insisted on pouring it herself, a gesture of warmth, not authority. And during her travels abroad, she never asked for rare delicacies, only that her Earl Grey and Dundee cake be ready on arrival. These small comforts were her anchor, reminders that even in the vast machinery of monarchy, the simplest pleasures endure. They were gestures of humanity inside a life defined by duty. And sometimes, a jam sandwich could feel like home. In the end, Queen Elizabeth II's meals told a quiet story, one not of wealth or extravagance, but of discipline, tradition, and comfort. While the world saw the splendor of crowns and ceremonies, her private world was filled with routine. The same teas, the same biscuits, the same breakfast tray arriving with quiet precision. Her favorite dishes were never about taste alone. They were about stability, order, and belonging. The simple foods that carried her through decades of history, loss, and change. To know what the Queen ate is to glimpse what she valued most: constancy, grace, and the quiet strength of British simplicity. Because in the end, it wasn't the feast that defined her reign. It was the tea poured at 4 o'clock, the cornflakes at dawn, and the chocolate cake waiting faithfully on the sideboard. If you'd like more memories like this, you know where to find us.